Oh, hello everyone. This discussion is electrical technology. Um, Before we formally start our discussion, um, let me introduce you my group mates. Adrian Justin Ciarot. I am the responsible for making the PowerPoint presentation. The next one is Jefferson Adem. He is our um, reporter. Also, Jiza Idigawan, um, one of our reporter also, and Kinsyril P. Tolentino. Um, he is also our reporter. Charlie E. Marimon, um, responsible for editing our video, and reporter. Vivian Vera B. Ortado, she is also our reporter, and Shimmer E. Kizan, he is also our reporter. This discussion is here to, this presentation is here to discuss about the following. A description of the core competency, discussion or demonstration of the evidence guide, an assessment activity for the competency according to the evidence guide, and required resources for the assessment activity and how this will be arranged or placed within a safe and accessible assessment environment. Cost of assessment and assessment process in compliance to the policy and procedures of an organization. And lastly, how should an assessment activity be communicated to an appropriate personnel or according to the policy and procedures of an organization. So, I will give the floor to Mr. Jefferson Adem. Jeff.
So hi everyone, I will be explaining the unit descriptor. This unit of core electrical competency covers the knowledge, skills, and attitudes in performing assembly of electrical control system. So an electrical control system is a physical interconnection of devices that influences the behavior of other devices or systems. And this unit of core electrical competency course covers it focuses on the course on which we will discover the necessary ways on how to handle control system and the necessary tools to use in assembling the control system unit, and the attitude which is used to how to handle interacting with other co-workers in an organization. So to summarize it all, this the description of this course is that we will discover the necessary ways or guides on how to uh, on how to the steps on how to assemble the control systems, the necessary tools that will be used, and the attitude or the social interaction between coworkers in the organization. And that would be all. Thank you. So next, we will be welcoming Miss Digawan for her next presentation. Thank you.
Everyone, my name is Jazan. I am tasked to tackle about the evidence guide for the assessment of this competency. And by the way, guys, evidence guide is the guide of the trainer in collecting evidences of the performance of the candidate if they qualified on this certain competency. So now let's start with the first critical aspects of competency. So here are the critical aspects. So this must be the highlight of the candidate. And first, the candidate must demonstrate understanding or interpretation on diagrams, symbols, and work instructions, also with the proper use of materials, tools, and testing instruments for assembly of electrical control system, the correct procedures for installation and wiring of electrical control components, understanding on proper testing procedures, and also to select and use correct personal protective equipment, which is very important for the protection of the candidate and also in the work area. And followed work schedule, and demonstrated good work attitude. So it's not just about the knowledge and skills, but also with the attitude. Next is the underpinning knowledge. It includes the materials use and specification, economic use of materials, safe working habits or safety procedures, Philippine Electrical Code or PEC requirements, and electrical control um, components and devices, and also the correct procedures in worksite tools and equipment. Next, we will go to the underpinning skills. First, reading and interpreting different types of electrical diagrams and work instructions correctly, verifying materials, tools, and testing instruments, following wiring diagrams, safety procedures, proper handling of materials, using of hand tools, splicing of conductors, dressing or harnessing of wires, terminating and insulating of wires, storing excess materials, checking quality of work, communicating skills, both written and oral, measuring techniques or skills, estimating quantity or bill of materials, preparing request forms for supplies or materials, tools, and equipment. And also, the following resources should be provided. So, these are the resource implications. First is the workplace location, tools and equipments appropriate to assembly of electrical control system, and also the materials relevant to the activity, and wiring diagrams, the layouts, the drawings, or everything that will help the candidate to understand the assessment. And next is the methods of assessment. It is the direct observation or application of task, questions, or interview related to underpinning knowledge, the portfolio or the credentials, the written test, it almost about the symbols, and lastly, for the evidence guide is the context for assessment. So competency may be assessed in the workplace to observe or check workmanship, correct function of work, length of time in doing the work. Assessment shall be observed while the tasks are being undertaken either individually or as part of a team under limited supervision. Alright, so those are the evidence guide for this competency. So it's not only about the knowledge and skills, but also with the attitudes. And it is very important to take note about the critical aspects of the assessment. And that's what my part. And let's welcome the next reporter, Mr. Marimon.
So now let's proceed to the next aspect of competency, which is the aspect competency number 4, the resource implications. So the following resource should be provided. So first we have the workplace location. So the workplace location is where the assessment takes place. So this is a place where the trainee perform a certain task. Next, we have the tools and equipment appropriate to assembly of electrical control system. So it includes the pliers, screwdrivers, wrenches, wire splicers or strippers, electrician knives, electric hand drill, hand or electric taping or threading, hacksaw, file, a manual or hydraulic puncher, and we also have measuring tools like for example a pull push roll and so on. So next is the crimping tools, soldering tools, a manual or hydraulic pipe bender, a manual or hydraulic electrical pipe threader or reamer, and high speed cutter. Next we have materials relevant to the activity. We have testing instruments like multi-tester, clamp ammeter, insulation resistant tester, ground resistance tester, and earth leakage tester and harmonic. And next is the most important thing in the topic, which is the wiring diagrams, layout, shop drawings, and specifications relevant to the task. The next aspect of competency is the methods of assessment. So it is a method of evaluating something or someone. However, a variety of testing and evaluating methods can provide insight into some characteristics or personality. So competency in this unit must be assessed through um, direct observation of application or tasks, questions or interview related to underpinning knowledge, portfolio or the credentials, and lastly we have written tests specifically about symbols. And the last aspect of competency is the context for assessment. So what is context assessment? Context context assessment is defined in this guide as an information collection and analysis exercise designed to improve understanding of a geographic target area and or subject of inquiry within a certain time frame. So first we have competency may be assessed in the workplace to observe or check workmanship, correct function of work, length of time in doing of the work. And lastly, we have assessment shall be observed while the tasks are being undertaken either individually or as part of a team under limited supervision. So that are the 6 aspects of competency. The next reporter is Vivian Vera Ortado. Miss Vivian, please come in.
Hello everyone, so I will now discuss the cost of assessment and the assessment process in compliance to the policy and procedures of an organization. So I have here the cost of assessment in the qualification electrical installation and maintenance NC4. So this is based on TESTA circular number 065-2020. I've also included the number of training hours, the number of training days, the training cost, and the assessment fee. So in electrical installation maintenance NC4, we have 516 training hours, 65 training days, and the cost of the training is 9,000, and as for the assessment, it costs 500. Okay, so let's move on to the assessment process. The assessment process focuses on the evaluation of knowledge, skill, attitude, and work values of an individual in relation with a certain unit of competency. A certification will be given to those who will pass the assessment test. So let's go to our first step, which is the checking of facilities and resources. It's important for an assessor to check first the facilities and resources before conducting the assessment to avoid any future problems that they may encounter during the assessment. Okay, next, preparation for the candidate. Introduction of the competency assessor for the qualification. So our qualification is electrical installation and maintenance NC4. And by the way, an assessor, before an assessor should formally start, it's appropriate that he or she would begin it with a prayer. And then after that, the introduction of him or her as the competency assessor. After introducing himself or herself, he or she should acknowledge the tester representative and its role during the assessment. After that, the checking of attendance, and then the collection of admission slip. So in collecting the admission slip, an assessor should check the signature in the attendance sheet and the signature in the admission slip to see if they are alike, as well as the picture of the candidate. Okay. Establishing the purpose, competency standards to be assessed, and context of the assessment. So an assessor should state purpose to be a qualification holder, state the qualification title, the number of units of competency, and the cluster of the competency. And also, an assessor should state the assessment procedure or method. So in this qualification, we usually have the written test and demonstration as our method or assessment procedure. And the time allotted for this is 8 hours. Okay. Explain reasonable adjustments, legal and ethical responsibilities. When we say legal and ethical responsibilities, this refers to the candidate's right to appeal if he or she is not satisfied with his or her assessment results. So, okay. Issuance of NC or COC in reassessment confidentiality. So, an assessor should inform the candidates how many business days before they can get their NC or COC. So, NC stands for National Certificate, COC, Certificate of Competency. And as well as the process of reassessment if ever the candidate would wish to be reassessed. Remind candidates for safety precautions or contingent action. Okay, yes. So after that, the gathering of evidences. In the gathering of evidences, an assessor would hand out specific instructions. So this enlists all the tasks that the candidates need to accomplish within the day. After handing out the specific instructions, the collection of evidence is based on the methodologies in the evidence plan. So the assessment may formally start here. Like what I've said before, is the written test. First is the written test. After the written test, ask candidates to perform. So that after the written test, the demonstration. And the assessor will observe and note unusual conditions on the rating sheet. After everything, after the assessment, after the written test and the demonstration, the assessor needs to provide feedback on the candidates. It's advisable that the assessor give first the constructive and positive feedback. No? And after stating the positive feedback, he or she can state the areas that the candidates need to improve. And feedback should be based on the answer sheet, the rating sheet, and the list of questions as reference. Okay. After, like what I said, after the positive feedback on candidates who are not yet competent, encourage them to practice harder for the next assessment. Okay. After feedbacking, recording and reporting results of assessment. So after the feedbacking, the assessor records all the results to the competency assessment results summary, or what we've known as CARS. After recording all the results, the assessor will recommend the issuance of NC or COC to the candidates, and then advise the NYC candidates what to prepare and submit for the assessment application. NYC stands for Not Yet Competent Candidates. So the assessor needs to advise them of what to prepare and to submit for the assessment application. After all of that, the last step is to submit all assessment results to test the CAC manager or the representative present. So that's it about the cost of assessment and the assessment process. The rest will be discussed by Shemer Kisan.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're on the last slide today. So, I hope you guys are with us through this last presentation that we have. Now, this last presentation is being highlighted by this question being said that how should an assessment activity be communicated to an appropriate personnel according to the policy and procedures of an organization. So the question here is how to communicate your assessment activity to authority or the appropriate personnel that is being tasked to validate that assessment. Now, the appropriate personnel can communicate the assessment activity in accordance with the policy and procedures of an organization, in the way that the policies and procedures in an organization help it operate effectively. Okay. It will provide direction to the trainee or employee and spell out organization's philosophies, ethics, and standards. It will also provide a written framework for a certain organizations. Also, it can provide training and future reference that covers everything from the organization processes to the ethics and vision of the organization. So here, it highlighted this highlights the importance of the ethics and policies and procedures that need to be followed by the trainee. Okay, so the question here is how to convey the said assessment or assessment activity to an appropriate officer or personnel or stakeholders. Now, as it said from the screen, from the context derived as written framework, we will provide a written framework. So the method here that we're gonna use, it is the communication method, which is written method. Okay, so by using or formulating some written framework, we can base our assessment and give it to the appropriate personnel by submitting the assessment evidence guide. Okay, assessment evidence guide summarizing scheme. It is a summarizing scheme. This is being submitted to TESDA CAC manager or his or her representative that is being validated and examined through systematic and precise manner, observing the said written report being acknowledged by policies and procedures, following the flow of an organization, attaining its desired objective and goals. So after the thorough validation process, the assessor could proceed implementing this assessment activity to its trainee or employee. So during that process, the assessor could validate the gap analysis, the performance criteria, and the said skills that is being needed to accomplish the said qualification. So the assessor has this crucial part in handling this trainee to achieve their perceived skills and knowledge, so that the assessor could determine if the trainee has the capability to attain such qualification. So in order to do that, the assessor could provide some informative and effective feedback during or after the demonstration or performance. And also, the assessor should record all the areas that needs to be developed and areas that the trainee has, or areas that could develop more or improve the said performance. So the assessor itself could determine whether the trainee has the capability to accomplish such qualification. So after that, recording all the data being recorded to the rating sheet, to the criteria and other performance results, this will be submitted to a CAR, which is being discussed by our by the last reporter about this one. So this should be submitted by written data or by formulating framework that is being written in order to be validated by an appropriate personnel to ensure that the assessment processes is in accordance with the policy and procedures of an organization. That's all. Thank you.
And now let's move on to the first part of the evidence guide, which is the critical aspect of the competency and the assessment evidence requirement that the candidate must need to achieve during the competency assessment or the assessment of the activity. So this will be the sample activity of the candidate. So let's move on to the first evidence requirement that the candidate must observe. So demonstration of understanding of the proper use of materials, tools, and testing instrument for assembly of electrical control system. So during the assessment, the candidate must demonstrate and perform the following procedure of the given assessment or activity. So in assembling the electrical control system, the candidate must use and select the personal protective equipment. So he must wear and ensure to wear the personal protective equipment, or what we call the PPE. So one of the example of that is the proper working clothes, working gloves, safety shoes, gas, dust mask, hard hat, and safety goggles. Of course, that is the basic personal protective equipment in a certain establishment or a suggested PPE. So next is the candidate must observe or demonstrate the correct procedure for the installation and wiring of electrical control components. So in the installation and wiring of electrical components, the candidate must ensure that the condition of every component of a certain equipment must be in accordance with the appropriate function, and the temperature must be analyzed and observed. It is possessed with the literal condition with a certain equipment to avoid harm or fall during the assessment. So, and also the candidate must fully understand the proper procedure of the assessment. So one of these things that the candidate must do is to check and ensure the work to conforms with the plan. So during the assessment, the candidate must lay some components and devices for safety, and also electrical component must be checked if it is wired correctly in accordance with the wiring diagram. And also the candidate must check the task to avoid the possible occurrence of fault. So that's the most important of all. Recheck and recheck if it is appropriately in accordance with the process. So also the candidate must follow the work schedule. That is the most important of all. Follow the work schedule. So in any aspect of the competency, it is necessarily to follow the work schedule. It's a part of the job requirements and one of the critical aspect which required to follow in industry standard. So we need to be on time with the schedule of the work. So also during the assessment, the candidate must show good work attitude. So let's talk about attitude of the candidate during the assessment. So this will be the suggested attitude that the candidate must show on. So first, communicate effectively to ensure safety and successful assessment of the task. Good communication. The candidate must listen and internalize instruction given by the assessor for the efficiency of the assessment activity. So internalization of the instruction is really important during the assessment. So next is the candidate must observe safety precautions during the assessment. Emphasize the essence of safety all the time during the assessment. This is one of the things that the candidate must possess. Lastly, the candidate must need to have a healthy communication between the facilitator or the assessor for the smooth assessment process. That is the most important of all, the mutual understanding and relationship of the facilitator or the other individual who surrounds you, and especially during the assessment.
this will be the sample activity. And that will be all.
So that would be all for our discussion. So I hope you learned something about our presentation. Thank you and God bless.